be. That's done for effect too, to have that experience. Because we are not these things, we create situations in which we can have those experiences in a meaningful and powerful way that seems very real. And while we're playing the human game, it's important to play it with that sense of reality, but also with the awareness that there's more. You have to be able to hold that concept in your head that it's not real and real at the same time. It's illusion and reality at the same time. It's a tough one. What I have often said at times of, national tragedy, as this is, moments when planes go down and there's loss of life and everybody is focused on it. Times when a celebrity's passed away and everybody is focused on it. Is that this situation was created and the people involved on the highest level of their being, by the way, chose to create this to say something, to tell us something, to help us experience something, which ultimately is to remember the truth of who we are. And this example in Charlottesville is no different. Although, maybe more powerful for some, for me for sure, as a person of color. But it's no different than any of these other situations, which I've talked about many times on this show. This situation and everything leading up to it and all of the actors involved in it conspired to create this, to help us deal with, on one level, and become aware of things like hatred, of bigotry, of separateness. I mean, there's no more vivid example of the illusion of separation than outright bigotry and intolerance based on religion, based on skin color, based on sexual preference. Because those are things that we use to separate, to say that's other and that's not me. And then with that sense of separation comes this idea of, the duality itself of separation opens up the door for all kinds of illusions, fear-based, anger-fueled illusions. But the powerfulness of this moment is that it is to show us that this is not who we are. And motivate us to remember that and act upon it in whatever way that we can. And this incident in Charlottesville is a very powerful statement about that. And when I look at it that way, it gets easier and easier to hold on to the higher perspective, to say that this was created for us so that we could remember that these people, vile though their characters are, at their highest level chose to do something so terrible that so many people would revile them for. But at the highest level, being part of the oneness, they chose to do it as part of the message. That's sometimes hard for people to, wrap their minds around. The idea that the being, or the higher level of being, of somebody like Adolf Hitler, chose a persona in which to, come into this world at the time that they did, and perform horrible acts that would make them reviled by many throughout history. And it's done. I mean, think how much it would take, how much you would have to want to help the world at the highest level of your being, to be willing to go forward and be a persona that people would remember forever as a monster. That the name of the character that you are, or were at the time, would be forever throughout history associated with horrors. But that you do that to remind people, to help people understand the truth of who and what we are. It's hard to hold on to sometimes. But particularly if you take it into meditation, it resonates. I think, at least I hope, that you will find that it resonates. Yeah. So, I needed to spend that time on this issue, so I'm not going to get to spend as much time on the other issues that we like to talk about in this show, but we're going to go on to that right now. We've been talking quite a bit. Last week we did quite a bit on the power of the mind to heal, and the overuse of medications, and how we can take better care of ourselves by the way we think about things and the way we think about ourselves. So on the show, we've talked about the placebo effect, which is something that, has become part of the scientific process, yet without a full understanding of it. Many drug tests are done using placebos to see if the drug is effective. So they'll give a controlled group a placebo, and another group the medication they're trying to test, and see what the effects are. And quite often what they found is that the placebo has effects that are the same or quite similar to what the medication does. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. We'll get back into the placebo effect. And talk about, as many of you are practicing yoga, or have started to as a result of listening to me talk about it on this show. I want to get into yoga as an aerobic exercise, because a lot of times, and I've had this happen to me, You know, the doctor's asking you if you're exercising, and I tell them I'm doing yoga, uh, and they don't see that as an aerobic exercise because it stretches and tones muscles, uh, and does a lot of other things to help de-stress. But they don't see that as aerobic exercise when it actually can be. So we want to get into that. Probably not today because of the events, but let's talk about placebos for a minute. Uh, Now, for centuries, doctors have prescribed treatments without any clinical data to prove the treatments themselves actually worked. And nobody questioned the treatments the doctor prescribed, and nobody did studies to prove whether something was effective. And it wasn't until the late 19th century that the idea of using placebos in clinical research began to emerge. And there was an article by Dr. Henry Beecher called The Powerful Placebo, which made the case that if you dosed people up with drugs, many got better, but if you gave them plain salt water or some other inert ingredient, about a third of them were also cured, not only in their minds, but in real physiological ways that could be demonstrated in the body. And so suddenly this concept of placebo effect became a mainstay in medicine. And scientific studies bear the burden of proving the healing effect of a drug or surgery being tested, in that it would have to transcend the potent healing power of the placebo. If a drug or surgery demonstrates that it's more effective than a placebo, then it's deemed to be effective. And if not, then the FDA probably won't approve the drug or the surgery, and the treatment will be dismissed as ineffective. But what exactly is the placebo effect? I think a lot of particularly people who are trained as scientists and doctors and researchers don't stop to think about the miracle that is right in front of them. Because if a percentage of people simply get better because they believe they're getting better, they believe they're getting something that helps them, that means that they are being healed completely by the mind. So, and I mentioned this author last week's show. We'll get into later, but she, after a rather celebrated career as a doctor, decided that she wanted to research the ability of the mind to heal, and to do it in a way that uses traditional, well-known research of the kind that scientists and doctors will accept. So this is from her book, and she's talking about placebos here, and how they work. And does everybody respond to placebos and things like that? And there are all kinds of stories that she gives us. Stories that doctors are well aware of, by the way. And these are stories that she says doctors talk about amongst themselves, but don't really talk about in public. Like the story of a woman whose cancer shrank away to nothingness during radiation that never really happened because the radiation machine was broken. But she believed she had gotten the radiation, and her tumors disappeared.